Hi, I'm Jess, executive producer on League of Legends,
And hi, I'm Andre, and I'm the game director on League of Legends.
and this is League of Legends Support. At Jerry Ferrara, I am determined to get decent at League of Legends. Currently, I am getting my ass kicked. In response, Mind of AB, I have tried watching it on Twitch and don't get it. Is it better to play to get a better feel for the game? I know it is crazy popular, just don't understand some of it.
Start with some basics here. League of Legends is a team-based game. Two teams competing over about 30-35 minutes to try and destroy the other team's base. Everybody picks a unique character. There's a really large roster you pick from. It's a pretty deep game. It can be pretty hard to get into. And I think the way we've seen people have the most success with that is to play with a friend or somebody who already knows some of the game. Have somebody teach you the ropes and get you past that initial learning stage. For a lot of people, though, it also works well to just dive straight in.
I would definitely try to pick a champion that you think you can stick with for a few games, a character that you really like. If you like their theme, that helps a lot. And just stick with it. Honestly, as long as you kind of understand the basics of try to get the Nexus, you'll learn a lot of the mechanics along the way.
Getting good at League of Legends, that's such a hard question depending on what your definition of good is. It's kind of like asking how do you get good? How long does it take to get good at a sport? You might start doing well compared to other new players almost immediately. And then we've got people who are insistent that even people who've played thousands of games, even some of the people who play professionally are not good enough for their standards of good. At GZQJLOV V2E0WG1W asks, at League of Legends, will you develop a mobile game for League of Legends?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. We are currently working on this right now, and we actually announced it during our League of Legends 10-year anniversary. It's called Wild Rift. Hopefully it's going to come out soon, and we hope you like it. At Cora Berry asks, what's some fun facts about League of Legends?
Well, one fun fact, we just had the 10th anniversary for League of Legends last year. And as part of that, we're sort of reflecting and looking back at just how much the game both has and hasn't changed over the years. Its core is still very much the same game that launched back in 2009, but almost every element of it has been refined, has evolved over time. And we occasionally get the question, when are you going to make League of Legends 2? And I think from our perspective, we've made League of Legends 2, probably League of Legends 3 and 4 already at this point, but our style is just to keep those things rolling out as a constant series of updates to the game, rather than a discrete name change and a relaunch or anything like that.
A big part of League of Legends' 10-year anniversary was announcing a bunch of games that needed to keep under wraps for so long. Us being able to finally announce all of that and be able to have that payoff of, no, we actually do want to invest in League in the long term as as an ecosystem, as a franchise. We have this lifelong commitment to the game and the sport.
We're in this for the long haul. We won't always get it right at first, but we'll keep coming back to it and figure things out.
At Neon Cats asks, I'm wondering if there's any wild champions, reworks, or item ideas that never went through and we never heard of, both kit-wise and lore-wise. I'd like to hear the most chaotic of ideas, please. I live for these.
Okay, so we've tried a lot of stuff that never ended up happening for one reason or another. I think we'll focus on the kit side of things rather than the lore side here, because we're much more likely to go back to the lore side, and don't want to spoil that if we do. Echo, for example, used to have an ultimate that would rewind the entire game, 5 to 10 seconds. The only exception was if a champion was dead, they'd stay dead, but every other champion and unit on the map would go back to their previous position, have their health, their mana, their cooldowns reset, and so on. It created some really cool and funny moments, but a lot of the time it was just a really annoying nullification of consequences and actions. Another champion we're developing at the same time as Echo was Bard, and Bard at one point had an ultimate that sent out a giant sound wave from his team's Nexus that would silence and slow enemy champions when they were in it. And the combination of trying to playtest those two at once was just a bit of a nightmare of endless sound and slowing waves covering the landscape and then being reset and repeating over and over again. For some others, we had an idea for a painter champion who had different colours of paintbrush and could make shapes on the ground, and then activate that paint to do things like, create sort of fire lines and, deal damage or slow or create walls or whatever based off the shapes created. But it never quite worked out because the best play was usually just create a blob of paint really quickly and then just stun stuff in it or something similar. So it sounded all creative and artistic, and it just boiled down to throw an AoE at them, unfortunately. Another concept that was fun but never went anywhere was for a giant mech sort of character, a fair bit like Urgot. Two of his abilities were shoot left and shoot right. He was like a old school sailing ship, and he had cannons that could only fire out one side of his body. And that was really novel, but it didn't turn out to be that much fun. Character got rebooted, this time with the name Shrink and Squash, with a bunch of tank treads and the ability to just run over people and squash them, and a shrink ray to make it easier to do so. Again, didn't happen. What about you, Jess? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think of things that are, a little bit older, like when she had her old R, where you could basically R from one blue buff to the other and get both. That was definitely pretty broken. There was also a point where, when we were working on Skarner, we were trying to figure out what this Crystal Scorpion was going to be, and there were 500 different versions of this freaking scorpion, ranging from the scorpion by itself to having a scorpion rider to Ziggs, who I think started off as a potion human,
an alchemist.
An alchemist of some sort.
There was the Kali rework that at one point had a skill that allowed her to attach herself to a missile and then ride along with it. So if your team had an Ashe with her global ultimate, Akali could just hop a ride on that and travel across the entire map. It was pretty buggy, pretty janky, very powerful.
It was cool, but it was not as useful as you'd think.
Oh, Aurelian Soul in a much earlier version had a global Lee Sin Q as his ultimate. So he'd fire it out across the map, and if he hit somebody, he could then basically zoom to them, traveling across the entire map at really high speeds. Most of the time it just missed, and it was a giant bait for his team, because he'd be trying to split push or whatever and then miss a skill shot. At Leon J. Fernandez asks, at League of Legends, hello, I'm a student studying games development, and a huge fan of your game. Any advice on getting into the game industry?
I think there's a lot of ways you can get into the game industry. It really depends on kind of what you want to do. If it's art, there's a huge swath of areas within art, right? It can be anything from concept art to 3D modeling to animation to illustration, right? To visual design. There's so many types of ways of kind of deepening your craft and figuring out, okay, well, if I go into UI, there's, I'm looking at menus, I'm looking at progression systems, I'm looking at all sorts of stuff, and design, same thing. Do you want to go into systems? Do you want to go into game mechanics? Anything is kind of, it's your oyster. Really understanding what speaks to you and how you want to really deepen your craft. Going hard into that one line of expertise can just open up opportunities later for you to kind of expand and be able to make more parts of the game.
The other thing I'd suggest doing is just start making games, if you're not already doing so.
Anything as simple as a 2D shooter or, a small platformer.
Board games using pen and paper or a homemade RPG campaign.
If you kind of use your expertise to maybe add one differentiator to that game and kind of talk through what you were trying to improve with that game.
It'll both give you valuable experience and skills, and it gives you great things to put on a resume or to talk about in an interview to actually get into the industry.
That can be a really great kind of insight into your thought process and kind of how you develop games, and that's actually great to learn from you.
The difference between two candidates, one of whom has gone out of their way to try and make stuff already, who's shown that passion and learning, versus another who is really interested in it, but hasn't actually put the time and the effort in yet, is really stark when you're interviewing somebody. Mickey
Box asks, League of Legends friends, any tips on how to learn a basic build strategy for 2 to 3 champions, Morgana, Ashe, Garen for now?
So there's a few different ways you can approach these. The first is just jumping into the game, starting with things like the recommended items, experimenting, learning what works for you. The second is to go to a lot of the really good third-party sites out there that use the League of Legends API and show off a bunch of recommended builds, things that do really well for champions in different contexts, like what's good for Morgana or Ashe in Plat Plus play, for example. And they'll recommend combinations of items, of runes, of skill orders, those sorts of things. And the third option that could be worth thinking about is trying to track down one of the communities for those champions. Things like the Morgana mains subreddit or whatever, where you'll get a lot of talk and detail about just that particular champion.
In this preseason, we're also looking into revamping the item system and the item shop. So actually, this will be a problem where we're trying to make it a little bit easier.
And that'll include things like recommended items that are automatically updated based off what other players are doing with that champion, rather than being hand-coded by us at Riot and getting out of date and being incorrect, all that sort of thing.
It will also automatically update as patches kind of come out. Update what items are relevant for you and make sure that it's still a good build for you to buy.
At 7sign1e asks, do you think a person's main or role is a reflection of one's personality? Is there any data or insight available on the matter? I believe we did at one point look at chat restriction and ban rates by champion and by position, and there are some champions out there that have really chill player bases on average. Bard players, for example, are generally going to be pretty chill people. Without naming any particular champions, we've got some top laners in particular, where certain high mechanical champions have some of the more vocal and likely to be penalized players in the player base.
Hey Andre, how often is that for Yasuo players?
They're pretty high up there, though not top of the list, but close. At Ejurakai asks, how to get better at League of Legends? After every game you play, take a moment and reflect on what did you do poorly that game, or what could you have done better? Because beyond a certain point, playing hundreds or even thousands of games won't make you better unless you're being really critical of your own play. Even in the game in which you did fantastically, take that moment of time and reflect, hey, did I overextend for that ward? Did I not track my minimap enough? Did I not give my teammates the information they needed? Those sorts of things.
Being able to look at your damage charts, looking at how much vision you've added to the game. Also seeing kind of like the timeline of how the game progressed and what happened and your participation in it really helps.
Sheer time alone doesn't matter enough. It's, I think, a combination of time and critical feedback that really gets you there.
Definitely think learning loops really help a lot. I would also encourage, if you do have a friend who can kind of watch one of your games afterwards and kind of talk through, especially if they have more experience, what you could do more optimally in the next time over. That's also a great way to kind of understand what you could be doing better.
At EastTG asks, what's the hardest role and the easiest role to play in League of Legends? #newbie.
I definitely think that jungle is pretty hard to pick up. There are so many things that you need to kind of learn about, just like map awareness, where the jungle camps are, how to apply the right amount of pressure on the different lanes. There's just like a lot to kind of do right so that your team is set up to succeed. But all of the roles have their own kinds of things that you need to learn.
Jungle, especially when you're first starting to play the game, is probably the hardest role to learn, particularly because it's so different than all the other roles earlier on in the game. I think support or the bot carry role are both fairly forgiving. Bot carry can be demanding on your positioning, but at the very least, you're playing with an ally there, somebody who will help you out. I also think mid lane can actually be a pretty forgiving role for a newer player, because the lane's so much shorter. You're just much closer to your tower, to a place of safety. So you've got much better odds of just being able to run away from stuff and actually survive it. Top lane, by contrast, can be pretty merciless when you're still trying to learn how it works, what other champions can do to you, that sort of thing.
I would have said support. Maybe I would still say support at this point, just because it kind of gives you some rhythm to support your ADC and give them the right buffs and heals. But nowadays, there's also pretty crazy playmaking supports as well, so there's definitely a breadth of difficulty there too. At Dano asks, how much RP do I need to be able to use @SafeLog's voice as announcer pack on the Rift? Asking for a friend.
Okay, I kind of feel you should be the one answering most of this question. One thing I will throw in here, we are still planning to get announcer packs as a general feature into League of Legends. They've been pushed back, somewhat unfortunately, due to COVID-19, but they're very much on our roadmap once things are a bit easier to work with. In terms of exactly how much RP for a SafeLogged voice pack...
We're gonna have to see. I don't know what the pricing is gonna look like.
Okay, charity auction?
Maybe we'll do a charity for it. If everyone says they'll contribute to a charity, maybe I'll record something.
Okay, hot pitch. Charity auction where you try and fake an announcer pack. Just live on stream while somebody's playing through the game.
You know what? Sure, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Perfect.
At GMousenHod asks, how do you decide that a skin line is successful, and how I, player, can make it return next year?
So we look at a few things when we're assessing a skin line. We look at how well that skin line performed relative to our expectations for it. How popular are the champions that are in the skin line, that sort of thing. So it's not just how many players picked up the skin, but relative to the skin line's expected popularity, how did it do?
In addition to buying the skin, we also look at whether you use the skin, actually. Did you buy it but didn't find it that interesting after a while, and so there's a different skin that you're using?
The next thing we then look at is general player excitement for that skin line. How excited are people to have their mains get a skin in this thematic, for example? And then, based off a combination of those, and also just looking at how many remaining champions we think could be a good fit for that skin line, we figure out whether to go back to it or not. Player hunger, basically. How interested are players in that? And we'll gauge that through things like social media discussion, through getting tweeted at directly even sometimes. If you love something, give us the feedback on it, is probably the single biggest thing. In terms of making it return next year, a lot of the time with the popular skin lines, we'll sort of have them alternate year on, year off. So we might do Project 1 year, Star Guardian the next, and then bounce back to Project again after that. And a lot of that is just wanting to get enough variety into the skins we deliver.
We also want to make sure that you actually get the most out of your purchase and actually enjoy it. We just want to make sure that whatever we make next year is actually something you would buy, love, and use.
At W. Naramore asks, are the upcoming item changes in the preseason going to focus more on new items entering the game, or changes to existing items?
It's going to be pretty balanced. We don't want to go too far into kind of flipping the table with items, because we understand like players also have affinity for certain items, and if anything, it should just be clearer about what works for your champion, what's purchasable, and makes sense.
We're thinking about a third of the item system should stay the same, so stuff that's already working well that'll still be familiar. Another third of it will be modified somewhat. It'll be recognizable, but with a bunch of changes. And then about a third of the system should be completely new. I'd also like to call out Firaxis, the studio behind games like Civilization and XCOM, for that third system. And we found that really helpful as a frame of reference when looking at League of Legends item system.
At Kosei asks, what does the honey fruit taste like? Can you eat the other plants?
Honey fruit is delicious. It's the most amazing fruit you've ever tasted. You can also eat the other plants. Blast cones are real damn spicy, so best of luck with them. Scryer's bloom will, let's just say, give you some gas, but you're free to eat them. At Leader Peasy asks, following my identity question about League of Legends, how the hell am I supposed to know what's my best role if I just won 3 straight games as a support? I picked Leona and we stomped every single lane like gods. I mean, should I play every lane?
Sick humble brag, play Leona.
Yes, you should play every lane.
At Howl Lockar asks, can you guys talk more about skins and tease us with more concepts, please? Also, are we going to get Star Guardian this year? I want Sona as a Star Guardian so bad. She deserves that. I think Sona as a Star Guardian would be super cool. Definitely great that you mentioned it.
So we're not going to just spoil all the upcoming skins we've got. Apologies. I can tell you that we've got a handful of completely new skin lines that we're going to be trying over the second half of this year. And we're really excited to get feedback from you folks on how much you like them.
The best way of kind of us getting ideas for who could be the next Star Guardian is when players are asking for specific champions in particular.
At Storm Arthur 7 asks, what has been the biggest lesson you've learned while working at Riot Games?
Definitely keep learning, keep adapting from what players are telling you, how they're playing the game, especially since the game itself has changed so much over time and it's such a deep one. It's great to just kind of get different perspectives, not only from the player base, but also the people who have come and joined Riot as players and want to just make the game better.
I think good results for game development are often much less about that single big brainwave or whatever, that flash of brilliance, and more about just repeatedly iterating, working as a group, taking feedback, getting things wrong, learning from it, repeating, and eventually iterating until you get something really good.
At Avis U asks, League of Legends question, what happens if I build full attack speed on Twisted Fate? Can I just yeet an entire pack of cards at once?
You know what? You personally can. But let's also do the math here. There's 52 cards in a standard deck. You can throw out 2.5 attacks a second. So the fastest you'll get without some way of breaking the cap is throwing the whole pack in about 21 seconds. It's up to you, but 21 seconds to throw a deck of cards doesn't feel like you're yeeting it to me, so I don't know, maybe TF cheats and uses magic or something, but it's not looking good.
At Subz's asks, if Bard was a piece of bread, what kind of bread would he be?
He'd be a sourdough. Because I love Bard, and I love sourdough, and Bard is kind of hipster. At Skyscraper0 asks, do you see a correlation between days of high heat/cold and lower than average player performance? I.e., do people tilt more and play worse on days when it's super hot? Lol.
I feel like the only time I've ever seen this actually manifest has been like that one time at Staples Center where everyone was like, it was pretty hot, I recall, and everyone was sweating and everyone had to play. Definitely found that probably to to be hard on the players when we're watching. Like any normal human being, you want to be comfortable while you're playing. Please don't subject yourself to having to be in an environment where you're uncomfortable and can't play and enjoy the game. But yeah, as any normal human, I think if you're trying to play a sport and you're uncomfortable, I'm gonna assume you're gonna tilt pretty hard. Andre, what's your follow-up?
So it's not directly answering this question, but it's something pretty similar. One thing we did look at one point was how much worse players got over the course of long gaming sessions late at night. We discovered that an awful lot of players, writers especially, lose between 5 to 10% win rate if they keep playing after about 1 a.m. And basically when you're still going at like 3 a.m. or whatever, you are losing so many more games. Even if you think you're still playing really well later on in the evening, you're probably not. At Kinnicky Dicky asks, are you guys planning on any visual updates? Not to be confused with VGU. There's a few champions that their visuals didn't age well with modern LoL over their gameplay. I like Morgana and Israel visual update, and I hope to see more.
We call both of them VGUs, actually, and depending on kind of the state of the character and, how much we think is iconic to that character, we decide on how much we want to preserve. And so for Morgana and Ezreal, we did actually change some of their gameplay as well, but because we understood that both of those champions have pieces of their kit that are very iconic to them, we wanted to make sure that players didn't feel like they were losing out with the change when we changed them and updated them to be more visually impressive and upgraded and kind of just better versions of their previous selves. With regards to are we ever going to make a visual update again? Absolutely. I think that's always going to be an option for us to consider when we're looking at VGUs, and it's just going to be a matter of kind of where on that spectrum we think is appropriate for that character.
We've mainly been focusing on hitting characters that need both substantial visual and gameplay improvements, because the amount of work involved in going back and updating all of a champion's visuals is about the same if you're keeping the old kit as if you're getting a new kit, so we just get much better value for the time spent. Having said that, we've also got through an awful lot of the older problematic kits at this point. I think there will come a time where we're in a much better position to do more updates that are very gameplay light, like Morgana and Israel, at some point in the moderate future. And that concludes all the questions we've got for now. Thanks to all of you who submitted them. We had a lot of fun answering them, and hope to do this again someday.
Keep playing League. See you later.